Next I'm going to do a child's learning toy, a stacking toy. This is certainly not a design of my own creation. I'm basing it on this style of rings that stack onto a post. This one happens to be fabric, but this style of toy has been around for decades.
These boards measure about 1.25 inches wide by about 3/8 thick. Based on the thickness of my material, I've designed a cone. I've gone to my computer and printed out this paper with line spacing a little narrower or shorter than the rings will be, because I'll have loss as I flatten the rings. So I've drawn out all these rectangles representing my various rings. Every 3 rings will be the same color to make these 8 bands of color. The rings will have 12 segments. Taking the diameters, multiplying by pi, dividing by that 12 segments, that gives me all my different segment lengths. To make sure I don't get confused, I'm labeling each section with the various colors of wood. Now that I know all my segment lengths, I'll go to the chop saw. I'm going to cut the segments 3 at a time. This is a stack of 3 little boards. I'm always looking for ways to speed up the process. I've dry fit all my segments together, 3 rings of each color, and each colored rings are all the same diameter. Here's a look at all my rings after the half rings have been sanded and glued back together. To prepare my rings for assembly, I need a smooth side on one side. I'll mount them on trays, run them through the drum sander so I have nice, smooth, consistent thicknesses. And to assist me, I'm going to put a hole down the center of the smaller rings. That'll allow me to use a little dowel to assist me in keeping things centered. This dowel can be either drilled or turned out afterwards. Sometimes you can even pull it out. But that dowel eliminates the hassle of trying to keep everything centered. With the larger rings, I'm just eyeballing the centering. For the base of my cone, I'm going to construct a floating base. I laminated 2 of my ebony discs together, and I've turned these little teeny grooves. That'll help prevent glue from migrating towards the disc during the glue up. I'm applying glue very sparingly and doing the bricklay thing and applying these clamps. Now I can take this after it's cured and mount it onto a disc of MDF that's been turned to the exact same diameter. This gives me the establishment of the base of my cone. The construction of the cone is pretty standard ring stacking, truing up things round, getting flat surfaces, using the tailstock cone to center things, and then using some additional clamps for pressure. To get this all turned, pretty simple process here. It's a straight line cone, so it's a matter of just working out getting this a nice straight line from fat end to skinny end. Once in a while checking it with a straight edge. And the exact angle I'm not too concerned about. I want just a nice straight line. Now that I have the cone dimensioned, I'm going to take those measurements, the small end and then the big end at the bottom, just above the ebony ring. Transfer those dimensions and draw out the actual finished dimensions of my cone. Then it just happens to work out that a 1-inch diameter ring is going to be just about right. So using that little piece of dowel, I laid on the cross section on my individual rings. Pretty simple matter to determine my individual diameters. Then using a ruler, getting my dimensions, doing the math to figure out the length of my various segments. So here's my cutting list with all the segment lengths. Before I start working on those rings though, I'm going to seal up my cone. I'm going to let this sealer dry for an hour or so, scrape it off, put another coat on and so forth. Probably put 3 or 4 coats of sanding sealer. Now the rings, this next set of rings, the construction is very much the same as the first set of rings. Cutting the segments, doing a dry fit. Here, though, I'm going to check this ID. The inside diameter is critical. If I get it too big, then I won't be able to fit up those rings. dimensions worked out. Here's all my rings. I'm putting them on trays here to go through the drum sander to get them consistently dimensioned, getting them ready to be glued together. To assist me in keeping my rings centered during the gluing, I've stacked some layers of MDF and turned a post. I've fitted up that post to the ID of these rings. Then it's a simple matter of lining up my rotational aid, the blue tape. The post does the centering job for me and allows me just to focus on the rotational position. The blue tape during a dry fit makes the rotational positioning pretty simple. This is a pretty quick and easy way to put two glue joints together. It only works if the inside diameters are all matched. Of course, I have to turn the post down to match each series of 3, but that's not too difficult to do. My next challenge is to turn these into donut-shaped rings. First step is to get the outside relatively round so I can remount it over and over. They don't have to be perfect, but I do need round surfaces. Now the big challenge here is to get the IDs to match this cone in the right location so they stack properly. There's no easy way to do it. It's a matter of turn a little, test, put it back on the lathe, turn, test, back and forth, until you get that ID, the right shape. Once I've got the shape right, some power sanding up to 400 grit on both sides, and now it's a matter of getting the outside of the donut shaped. Another stack of MDF turned to a post to fit this. You can see I got a little too aggressive, had to use some tape there to tighten up the fit. The goal is to get a nice round cross-section shape. You can't get too aggressive. You have to go slow and easy. Keep checking it. Work on one corner and then turn this around. Work on the other corner. Once it's looking pretty good, get both sides sanded. Here's my first one. Now I only have 6 more like this to go. Once I had my 7 rings completed, I applied sanding sealer, a couple of coats with some buffing done in between. I'll put more finish on these later. The last part of the project is the top of the cone. Here I put a ring on as part of the keeper for the sphere. I started with 3 rings of canary, and I drilled a hole down through the center of the smaller rings. That'll be an aid for keeping things centered. Then I split the rings to give me a total of 6, 3 for the top and 3 for the bottom. As you can see, I ran them through the drum sander to achieve consistent thicknesses. Now I'm cutting 7 rings of the 7 colors, small segments here. These are thicker than I need, but I'm going to also put those through the drum sander to arrive at a pretty thin thickness of about 3/16 of an inch. I also created 2 rings of canary, which you'll see later. Here's my stack for my sphere. I'm checking the measurements on this. I want the diameter to be slightly larger than the height because I'm going to notch these rings to assist me in the glue job. I'm going to glue all 7 of these together in one step using this little notch which I've created. That notch will replace the blue tape that I usually use. It's a lot more effective. I'm going to put all 7 of these together in one glue job. A lot of surface. No way can I align that without the assistance of that notch and this little shim. Lining up all the slots and then applying lots of pressure. These are very stiff clamps. I can barely open them up that wide. So I've got lots of pressure on this stack of rings. As you can imagine, this is a huge time saver, putting a stack of rings, 7 in this case, together in one step. I cleaned up one end and glued it onto my canary. Here I'm just cleaning up the outside surface, taking a little wood off the inside, preparing this end for the other canary layers, and again using my tailstock, keeping things centered. It's a little bit fatter than it is long, and that's good because I need to turn away those bandsaw cut grooves. To give myself access to the other end, I've turned this little plug and inserted the turned end. A little bit of CA glue holds it in place along with the tailstock. Now I can round up this other end that was in the chuck. I'm using this little template that I've cut on the bandsaw. Once I've got this about as round as my fingers can feel, my eyes can see, and the template can indicate, then a little parting cut here gets rid of the CA glue. It'll come right off the post. To get rid of the post, turn a little cup here, which I'll part off. I'll use this in a minute. Then turn another cup on the waste wood. Now between this cup and the piece that I parted off, I put a little water there just to make the wood a little stickier. But you can see how I've positioned it using that cut-off cup. A little adjustment here because of the way the pencil was touching the wood. A little more turning, just sneaking up on a perfect round fit. Now I'm going back and turning a new post, mounting it back the same way it was originally to get rid of these last marks. Next, I'm going to mount a little piece of canary wood, a little CA glue with some accelerator. This is just so I can turn a little teeny plug to put in this opening. Turning these takes a little bit of turning, testing, but not too difficult. A little tight bond in here, and that end's taken care of. To finish off the sphere, I'm going to use a jam chuck. This is just a stack of MDF mounted on a faceplate that's been hollowed out to accept the sphere. It holds it actually quite snugly. So much so I have to pop it out using that little access hole in the side. I've screwed on another disc of MDF and turned an opening that more or less matches my first opening, putting a little taper on there. Now using these 3 screws and the tailstock, I've got this secured and centered. I'm making an opening on this bottom of the sphere. Into that opening will go these 2 layers of canary wood. That'll become a receiver for the post on the cone. I've drilled a hole here just to assist me in the hollowing. Mounting it on another post held by the tailstock, I've turned a large plug. Now I'm going to fit this up to that opening. I want the plug to bottom out inside first, and then by sneaking up on the fit, keeping the gap still loose to the outside until the last minute is the best way to get a fit all the way through. A little glue holds this in place. Once the glue's dried, I can finish the sphere, clean up the bottom, turn a receiver for the post, turn the post down a little smaller, get that sanded nice and smooth, check the fit, it's still a little bit tight, remove a little more material, check it again, looks good, a little sanding, clean up the edge where it was in the jam chuck, some sanding sealer, buff it in between coats, sand it. I applied at least 5 or 6 coats of Def Gloss, buffing all the surfaces with a 400 grit sanding mop in between coats. All that's left is to get it off the MDF, which requires a little bit of turning, a little bit of power sanding cleanup here, and the same finish process on the bottom. A few days after Christmas, this is what it's all about. 6-month-old Abbott putting rings onto the cone.